Hi, it's Stu, and this is going to be a book review, but probably more like a book reflection and, my parting thoughts um, with these books. And yes, it's a lot of books. They were little, and I've been reading a lot. By little, I mean not very many pages in most of them. And also, there's one more that I read only digitally, which I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. So, the first book that I'm going to talk about is this one because it's the first one. I'm going to go in the order that I read them in. Little Reunions by Eileen Chang, translated by Jean Wei-Jin Pan and Martin Mers. There are just a couple of thoughts or points or reflections that come to mind when I'm talking about this book. The first is that this book was drafted and then not published before her death. And according to the information in the foreword that I read on the digital version, maybe it was the translator's note actually, that this book, the transcript of the book, the author Eileen Chang at one point had told somebody she would like it destroyed, but then it never came up again. And then years after her passing, the book was published. So it does lead us as a reading community that are so grateful for the words and the stories to also ponder, what right do we have to work that the author themselves didn't want published? And then, what does it mean to sort of take away the opportunity to consent from these authors once they're passed? I am of two minds and could definitely listen to both sides. I don't have strong feelings. However, I do recognize that this is something to really ponder, that is it more important that the stories get out there because they were meant to be told, especially given all of the context of the publishing industry, or is it more important to honor someone's desires? This book is, the setting is China, and the time is during the Japanese occupation of China. The main character is a young woman of means, and the book starts with her in Hong Kong studying, I believe it's medicine. Because of the bombing and the occupation, she has to return to mainland. Of China, in the area of Shanghai, I believe there's a couple scenes that take place that talk about Westlake, which is Hangzhou, and then ensues just sort of the life and days and times of this woman and this family. At the end of the book, there is a character sort of list, and it tells you who's who, and that's helpful because this book is one of those books like the one I had read just before it by Egan, Visit from the Goon Squad. There was just a lot of characters. Some of these characters go by different names, and they come in and out and twist and turn through the story, and sort of for those fantasy readers are used to that. For me, it was a little difficult to keep up. That being said, I don't think it took from the story. I think some people really like that. I also think that it gave a good insight on, roles and positions of the families. It really looked at a woman and women's issues, feminine issues such as lovers, place in the family, expectations, abortion. It looked at the impact of course, war. It looked at opium and the opioid addiction that was relevant. I believe this actual Eileen's father, I think I read that Eileen's father did suffer from an opioid addiction. So she was taking time in this book to kind of reflect on the impact of that, as the main character's father in this book has an opioid addiction. It was a fantastic read. I am very happy to pass this on to the person that I expected to give it to, albeit I was going to give it to her a week ago, which is about when I finished this book. I just didn't see her. So I have it still tagged or earmarked to give to her because it's one of those Betsy's books, and she is someone who is very close with her mother, and I think would enjoy being part of the community that talks about their mother on these postcards. So that's where this book is going now that it's been read. The next book I read was Wallace Stegner's The Spectator Bird. I want to preface this by saying that the version that I read was a digital one. So it wasn't this edition, because this edition doesn't come with a foreword by Jane Smiley, which the other one did. And I really want to say that it was indeed that Smiley's excellent summation of the work, the life, the body of work of Wallace Stegner that really helped me embrace this book, this short, lovely, classic story, in the way that I did. This is a classic, winner of the National Book Award, and it is published in 1975. So I expected and anticipated this would be a man's world view, very particularly a white man's world view, as that was what was really given the most opportunity to be published during those times. And while I have been really exploring works in translation and a lot of work by women and trans women authors lately, as I was missing that in my coming of age literary experience, especially those through, like, say, the school systems or something like where you would run into probably Wallace Stegner as a classic. That being said, I really appreciated the voice and the characters in this book. Smiley stated that almost every book of Stegner's is autobiographical in some way. That when he wrote about a place, and as I've been really into setting lately, he went to that place and stayed there for an extended period of time so that he could really understand what it's like to be a human in that place. I fully respect that, and I think that showed through this book. When I was talking about about it in the TBR video, I said it looked like Middle America, but in fact, Stegner, according to what Smiley was saying, was that Stegner is kind of known to be the Western author of the time, so California. That being said, he was born in Ohio, and I spent some time living in Great Falls, Montana. This particular book, I believe the setting is Northern California, and what stands out about this book, the old man, he's an older man, and Smiley addresses this too, who's reflecting on his life, and in fact, he's a bit curmudgeon-y, and he's a bit like, there's a little bit of an existential, like, am I just biding my time? And there's a lot of kind of, what does life mean in this stage? And exploration of grief. He's got a friend who's very ill with cancer, and he and his wife in this story are grappling with the now 20 years on in the story, death of their child, their son, Curtis. His love, the way he expresses his love in the relationship with his wife is so endearing. I found it very precious, and his exploration into the pilgrimage back to his mother's homeland, and the meeting of the characters and what that meant for his own development of identity was also quite poignant, and I really appreciated it. He did a lot in a little, and I think there's a book that comes before this with the same character whose name I'm not remembering right now, but I would definitely recommend The Spectator Bird to many people, and in fact have very particularly male audiences who like to explore introspective male voices. Wallace Stegner does a great job. There's also scenes in this book in the time when it's occurring. So there's a lot of like, it's a contemporary fiction of the time. There's a lot of talk about Klondike and Nixon. And there's a scene where, racism is confronted. There's definitely scenes and an exploration of the treatment and sexual harassment of females and what that has meant. Particularly in this case for his mother. So I think also reading this book as a historical classic and looking at all of the relevant issues of even contemporary times, it was also fantastic. Anyway, Wallace Stegner, The Spectator Bird. Next, I read Less by Andrew Sean Greer, and this is a Pulitzer Prize winner. So it was one of my winners. These two books were part of that read a book for each prize reading challenge that I made for myself. Less had been on my shelf for a lot longer than I thought it would be. And I had speculated that this book was about a middle-aged man who was kind of into corporate America. I understood that the setting was San Francisco and that, this sort of cover design gave to me that he life wasn't what he expected it to be. He just sort of did everything right and everything was falling apart. It wasn't completely on the head. There were some issues with that. It wasn't exactly about that. In fact, our main character, Arthur Less, is an author. And so this book, as well as this book where the main character is a literary agent, drops so many titles of books and references them. Yeah, I really enjoyed, I have to say that about both of these. Sorry for that sidebar. The referencing of other works of literature was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. We Are Completely Beside Ourselves did that as well. This book is about someone who is avoidant for his own feelings and love for all of the reasons, and sort of to avoid confronting a scenario, he books a trip around the world as an author to give workshops, classes, lectures, etc. So one aspect of this book that I really appreciated was the travel, the world travel, sort of the exploration of the places that he was going. And it's named Less because the main character's name is Arthur Less. The writing style is very witty. It's very quick. It was a fun read. And in the end, it kind of ended up being a romance. To the extent that I was glad that it ended up being a romance, which is rare for me to say because I've always said my piece about romances. Yeah, I found this to be a fun, and fulfilling read. After that, I read The Red Car by Marcy Dermansky. This book was one of those books that I got 10 for $5 and was considering just donating. Then I said it's really little, and then I had a conversation with a friend who has a red car. Then I read on the back that the first sort of promotional little blurb is by Roxane Gay, who says that the red car is taunt and strange and smart and sweet and perfect. So as someone who has, as a reader that loves Roxane Gay, I thought, let me give this little gem a chance. And I'm really, really glad that I did. There was a point. So first I'll give just a little of the synopsis. The main character starts on the East Coast. She's going to a Quaker college where she gets expelled for for charging someone that she really liked for sex. And even her attitude towards that is fantastic to look at and explore. She then moves across the country to San Francisco, where she gets a job in an office and comes under sort of the mentorship of an older woman named Judy, who really falls in love with her and really kind of is giving her a lot of strength and tips on how to be, a woman in this world. So the first part of the story is sort of that scenario. Then 10 years later, this main character is living in New York in a marriage that it's not fulfilling, and in fact, it's violent. And so she is able to escape it because she has to return to San Francisco due to the passing of Judy, and deal with this red car. This red car has elements of magic, so there's a little magic realism in it, and clearly, and even explicitly throughout the book, is a symbol. And this book was so fun and I agree, strange and fantastic. It reminded me, it had a lot of similar elements to All Fours, but in some ways it was like the style of the author was less cultivated and it was shorter, and I thought that was better. One of the things that I would say about All Fours is that it did start to feel a little bit long. In the beginning of this book, right when we move from when this character, the main character, is in her 20s to her 30s, I came out of the story a little bit because I found the writing strange is a word that doesn't really summarize, but it was strange. But what I felt was it felt young. It felt younger. It felt juvenile, and then rather than just sort of accepting that and being like, let's just see where this author's going, I got into myself and out of the story and thought, well, do I feel that that's strange because I'm making judgment that something really stark and taunt and bare is ergo less sophisticated, ergo more juvenile? Or is it that someone in their very early 30s is quite a bit younger in their mind and outlook, and I'm as a woman much older than that now, I'm making judgment calls from that stance. So I got out of it a little bit. Then I just said, hold on, keep going, finish this book. I'm so glad I did. This book is a testament to why one still gives books that they don't know anything about chances, because this and Ivy Pachota's Sing Her Down, which was not on my radar in any way, for whatever reason, it's just this book isn't something that I've heard talked about, that I know talked about, that this is an author I know, although this is not her first work. I found it, and it was absolutely a diamond in the rough. So grateful that I read it. Okay, so the next book that I read was actually the digital one. And it was kind of related to travel, and in this particular case, road tripping. So one of the reasons that I decided to read The Red Car is because I had on my TBR shelf just the digital version from the library of Off the Books by Soma May Shang. And I think I had kind of tentatively decided to just just let it fall off, come back to it later. It is from the library after all, because to round out that reading challenge, The People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks had come off, and that's the book that I chose to read. Then sort of went less by Andrew Sean Greer, and then this book took me into a little bit of traveling across the country, and in the case of less, around the world. I thought, reading the synopsis of Off the Books, let me give that a chance, because it was about an across the country road trip. And the main character is a driver. Her name is May, and she's a driver of a car service, but her services are off the book. So she's not, I guess, paying taxes or recording them in some kind of way. It's an under the table sort of car service. The book started as quite quirky and funny and sort of the road tripping elements, similar to sort of like On the Road, Jack Kerouac, that kind of stuff, were there. And I appreciated that. It then really developed into being something way heavier. And I also appreciate that too. So I'll just say these words that this book is really raising of awareness and a multi-character sort of discussion of the situation, the human rights violation and detention and situation of the Uyghur people in China. And I was a little bit familiar from the blip that it hit the international news, and I'd watched a 60 Minutes, I think Australia once, which had covered the concept of China spying on its own citizens inside of Australia. And this was happening as well. This was covered in this book. But other than that, I feel like this is a way under known for the gravity of the concern that a global community should have for what is happening to human beings, and the way that they are systematically being oppressed, detained. And this book does a fantastic job of really hitting on all of the aspects of that and raising awareness. So glad that I decided to read it. Again, it's off the books. Soma Mei Shang, and was a fantastic book. It also kind of kicked off, I read it, I think, very close to the beginning of May, which is Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I was glad it kind of fit into that as well of Chinese American themes. The next book I read just absolutely blew my mind. I absolutely will read this book again in my life when I'm sort of in a different place in time to look at it even from different angles. This book was Home Fire by Kamala Shamsie, and when I became aware that Kamala Shamsie's Home Fire is a retelling of Antigone, I fell down kind of a rabbit hole before I read it. I was a little bit of I geeked out a little about the Oedipus trilogy when I was 15, 16 years old. I remember I have some memory of really liking Antigone the best, and then I don't really remember what Antigone was about, just some like central themes. So I got into a long discussion with a friend or colleague, like, let's talk about the Oedipus trilogy and Antigone, and what do you think? You know, of course, self-determination and fate being such a major theme of that work. But also, one of my predictions for this book was burial rites and how important it is that families and cultures are able to see their loved ones off into the next world, whatever that means for them, correctly. So I kind of predicted that those elements would be in this book. And then I wondered, should I go ahead and reread Antigone after I read this book? I've since read this book. I absolutely loved all of the ways in which the story was told through the multiple characters, the way it unfolded, the way the plot unfolded, the way and how it followed, to the best of what I remember, Antigone in a modern telling. This book was amazing. Consequently, not going to read Antigone again, at least now, but I think, for the future, for future me, this book and Antigone together, because this book is going to get donated to the Friends of the Library or put in a little free library, because that's my commitment to myself with all of this almost hoarding of book hauling that I'm doing, is that they go back into charity. It's part of my sort of contribution cycle to the world of literacy and of storytelling. So I'm going to let it go for now. But absolutely, this is one that I want to come back to. Home Fire, Kamala Shamsie. The next book that I'm not quite done with, but I want to talk about, just in this cycle of talking about books. I should probably finish it on a long walk this weekend, and if not, on then my bus commutes in the beginning of the coming week, because it is a dense listen, and this is probably about 1.5, if not 2 hours of listening. And this book is brutal and beautiful, heartbreaking and heartwarming. It is simple and incredibly complex. There are times when I am so enchanted, and there were times when I'm so infuriated listening to this book. I'm so glad I'm listening to it, and it deserves so much of my attention, my intellectual and my emotional commitment. So it has been my first really, really in-depth listen, and I'm very happy that I was able to have access to this book. As I said before in the haul, no, not the haul, because this book is that old, the TBR video, this Alice Walker said this book is just amazingly, wonderfully great. And with that, with Alice Walker giving those props, I had high expectations, and it's meeting them. Should finish it soon. Absolutely told several people that they should at some point, and I even said listen to. I said, or at least do a hybrid. I had to listen because this font is dark and it just gives me a headache. So I recommended wholeheartedly Carry Home the Bone People. It's a winner of a Booker Prize. And now a bit of a classic, as it was published in, I believe, the 1980s. Yeah, 1983, New Zealand. So it's the only book in this sort of reading era, and maybe ever, if I'm being really reflective, where the setting has been New Zealand, very much important to this book. Really, if I don't do favorites, because I think, again, depending on your place and time, but if I said that my two most standout books of this huge reading pile are these two. The next book that I read was sweet young adult, if not middle grades. My child told me that they read this book in the 9th grade, and I thought when I was reading it, it felt for an even younger audience. But again, I tend to project about age, and based on sort of, in this case, it was the complexity, the multidimensionality of the characters. And I think those are just my own judgments that I need to have more reflection on myself, and this affords me the opportunity. Darius the Great is Not Okay is a sweet telling of a young man who combats and confronts clinical depression. And it very much is a book that humanizes, demysticizes, destigmatizes depression, but also bears true the reality of living with depression and or experiencing loved ones that live with depression. In reading the author's note, that was the intentionality of this book, and I personally think that it was really, really well done, and some of the simplicity of everything else really just was to give way for that to be the central sort of theme of this book. The main character of this book lives in Portland, Oregon, and I also kind of had some judgments around it. The way that the Persian culture is explained in this book, and maybe it's part of the reason that I thought that it was for a younger audience as well, felt more in the way that people, authors from smaller towns and especially middle America are going way, way, way back to the reader and or the people around them, depending how the story is developed, need to start at no experience, understanding, or yeah, understanding and or embracing culture. uh, and in that way, it felt, again, like I was a little surprised that it was Portland, Oregon. But that being said, maybe Portland is actually more small towny in that way. Um, I was very grateful for the opportunity to discuss this with my child, who this is the last book that they say they remember having really read. They were able to give me the synopsis that this is about a young man who is bullied, who didn't want to go to Iran to meet his family, and then he goes for the summer, and then he doesn't want to leave. And I thought, it kind of missed the really important part was how it explains and deals with depression. I thought it was a really good synopsis for someone who had read this book several years ago now, as a curriculum in school. Before I found out that this was a curriculum in the high school that is closest to where I live, where there's a little free library near, I was going to hurry up and get this book in there, as it is for a younger audience and summer readings coming. I wonder, and maybe this is me overthinking, if because this is curriculum, the students will be a little less excited to pick this up, as they probably already have been introduced to it for their ninth grade curriculum. And if maybe getting this into a school district where it's not, like in a neighboring town, could really afford someone the opportunity to either identify as a Persian American, explore the culture if they need it taken way back like that, and or certainly explore and be affirmed by the discussion of depression in this book. So I might take it to another town, but I could also just donate it to the Friends of the Library. The last one, I have less than 50 pages left, so I want to talk about it now. And this is Kelly Harm's The Overdue Life of Amy Byler. When I made the TBR video, I thought that this would come later, but I kind of wanted a palate cleanser after Home Fire. And this one gave romance to me, so I thought it could be a bit palate cleansing, and I wasn't wrong. It was a page turner in that it was pretty direct and straightforward, telling of a single mom who gets an opportunity to actually self-explore and do something other than work and raise her children. I'll say more on that in a second, but I'm sidetracked by the fact that if you see on this cover, I didn't note, I've had this book now for a couple of months. It's been sitting on my shelf saying to me, okay, go ahead and read on the books with names TBR. I didn't realize that those are books, and that the overdue is, of course, reference to a library. And indeed, Amy, the main character in this book, is a librarian. The parts of the book which were really, again, straightforward and simply telling of the martyrdom and the self-sacrifice of single motherhood were very emotional for me. It was very relatable. I am a single mother as well, and I am about the same age or similar age to this main character. So that look at, the amount of sacrifice and sort of almost loss of self, not opportunity to, I don't think it ever suggests that, your mother identity and even your worker identity aren't clearly parts of your life. It's just that this mother's own desires, and sort of opportunity to continue to grow and develop herself based on some individual idea of herself have really been stinted by duty. And that was emotional for me. I had some emotional moments with this book. It did then kind of delve into, as I predicted, more of a romance, as she's out dating in New York City in her free summer. And I usually don't enjoy romance, as I said, so I've come out of the story a little bit. I don't find the dating scenes compelling in almost any romance. I don't find dating compelling So that's just me. I'm not saying that Amy Byler is doing a bad job. I've just come out of the story a little bit. But I'm here. I'm here to finish it. I'm not suggesting that I'm going to DNF this book by any mean, or that this book wasn't worth my reading. It's just now that we're kind of into that, she's dating around and there's some romance elements to this book. I'm less compelled than to the sort of like female fiction aspect of this book. Yeah, this book is published by Lake Union Publishing, which is a publishing company based in Seattle. And I couldn't find it on the digital library shelf. So that's why I have had to read it just all the physical copy. More than fine, I've been able to do that. And I'm, again, excited to get this book back into either a little free library or donate it this week to the Friends of the Library, which I'm now a member of. So speaking of which, probably my next video, now after this long reflection on all of these books, will probably be that little, hopefully, mini haul at the Friends of the Library when I go and I get to have my 2 free books, and I will donate 2 or more of these to just kind of make it feel like an exchange, which is something I really appreciate. So until then, and